The galactic communication network pulsed with an electric tension that even the most seasoned interstellar diplomats could feel. Kralthar, senior executor of the Zernak Assassins Guild, studied the holographic display with a mix of professional detachment and growing unease. Humans had been on the galactic stage for less than 3 decades, yet they had already disrupted millennia-old power structures in ways no one could have predicted. The contract was deceptively simple: eliminate key human diplomatic representatives. But nothing about humans had ever been simple. Kralthar's exoskeleton clicked softly as he reviewed the initial intelligence reports. The Syndicate worlds had pooled an unprecedented amount of resources to fund this contract. 17 different species had contributed data, technology, and astronomical sums of galactic credits to see this mission completed. Their motivation was clear. Humanity represented a threat unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. In just 27 years, humans had done what no emerging species had ever accomplished. They had formed alliances that defied traditional diplomatic boundaries. They had developed technology that seemed to leap decades ahead of established research trajectories. Most importantly, they had a remarkable ability to turn potential conflicts into opportunities for mutual growth. The holographic display flickered, showing a complex network of human diplomatic and scientific installations. Each point represented a potential target, each location a potential nightmare for the assassination team. Kralthar zoomed in on the personnel files. Each human seemed simultaneously ordinary and extraordinary. Jack Harper, a diplomatic security specialist with a background in quantum engineering. Emily Rodriguez, an ambassador with degrees in xenocultural communications and advanced biological systems. Michael Thompson, a strategic coordinator who had previously worked in complex global conflict resolution. On paper, they were just individuals, but the intelligence suggested something far more complex. The Zernak Assassins Guild had a reputation built on absolute precision. Their success rate was legendary, 99.998% across thousands of contracts spanning multiple galactic cycles. They had ended civilizations, toppled governments, and shifted the balance of power with surgical efficiency. But humans were different. Preliminary reports suggested humans possessed an adaptive capacity that defied conventional biological understanding. Their technological development seemed to accelerate exponentially when faced with external threats. Where other species would retreat or collapse, humans seemed to transform challenges into opportunities for growth. Kralthar selected 9 assassins for the mission. Each was a specialist in a different method of elimination. 1. Vorax, a molecular disruption expert capable of unraveling cellular structures with quantum precision. 2. Neilrak, a biological warfare specialist who could synthesize neurotoxins lethal to thousands of species. 3. Zerakun, a psychological manipulation genius who could break the mental resilience of entire civilizations. 4. Groktal, a technological warfare specialist with access to the most advanced weaponry in the known galaxy. 5. Lyrapax, a stealth operative who could infiltrate the most secure installations undetected. 6. Krendar, a quantum warfare expert specializing in probability manipulation. 7. Shentok, a genetic warfare specialist who could modify pathogens to target specific biological markers. 8. Vexnar, a technological countermeasure expert who could disable any known defensive system. 9. Kralthar himself, the senior executor, bringing centuries of assassination experience. Each assassin represented the pinnacle of their respective disciplines. They had been chosen not just for their individual skills, but for their ability to work as a cohesive unit. The Guild Master's final briefing echoed in Kralthar's memory. Humans are an anomaly. They are not to be underestimated. But what did that truly mean? Kralthar pulled up the most recent xenosociological studies on human behavior. Their reports were maddeningly contradictory. Humans were simultaneously described as fragile biological entities and incredibly resilient adaptive organisms. They formed complex social networks that seemed to generate collective intelligence far beyond their individual capabilities. Most intriguingly, humans appeared to view potential threats as puzzles to be solved rather than obstacles to be destroyed. Where other species would respond with violence, humans sought understanding. Where civilizations would collapse, humans would innovate. The contract's details were clear. Complete elimination of specific human targets. No survivors. No traces. Yet something about this mission felt different. For the first time in the Guild's 1,000-year history, Kralthar felt a sensation that he had never experienced before. Uncertainty. The mission would begin in exactly 72 standard galactic hours. 9 of the galaxy's most skilled assassins would target individuals who, by all conventional wisdom, should be easy marks. But nothing about humans was ever easy. Ganymede Station hung like a crystalline jewel against the infinite darkness of space, its intricate networks of transparent corridors and gleaming infrastructure a testament to human engineering. Special Agent Jack Harper stood at the primary observation deck, his reflection a ghostly overlay against the star-studded backdrop. Vorax, the molecular disruption specialist, had spent 3 galactic cycles perfecting this moment. The quantum disruptor represented the pinnacle of cenocidal technology, a weapon that could theoretically unravel matter at its most fundamental atomic structure. It had ended entire planetary populations with a precision that made conventional weapons look like crude blunt instruments. The weapon was a marvel of engineering. Microscopic quantum entanglement generators would create a cascading molecular destabilization field, breaking down cellular structures instantaneously. No pain, no struggle, simply absolute, complete dissolution. Jack Harper had no idea death approached with mathematical precision. Unbeknownst to him, Vorax was already in position. The assassins' advanced camouflage technology rendered them invisible to conventional detection systems. Quantum-locked sensors would bypass any standard security protocols. This was perfection, a death so precise it would leave no trace. The targeting system locked on. Jack shifted slightly, adjusting the communication device on his wrist. A minor movement that should have meant nothing. But in the quantum realm, it meant everything. The moment the disruptor activated, something impossible happened. The quantum field, designed to unravel matter with absolute certainty, began to destabilize. It was subtle at first, a microscopic interference pattern that shouldn't have existed. Then more dramatically, the targeting vectors began to warp. Vorax's neural interface erupted with error messages. Impossible. Inconceivable. The weapon was failing. Jack turned, catching a glimpse of movement. His training kicked in, years of diplomatic security protocols transforming into pure survival instinct. By the time station security arrived, only a scorched section of corridor remained where the assassin had been standing. No body, no evidence, just another mysterious incident in the complex tapestry of human-alien interactions. In the station's central security hub, Dr. Eleanor Weber reviewed the initial sensor logs. She was a quantum physicist specializing in anomalous energy patterns, a field that had become increasingly relevant since humanity's emergence on the galactic stage. "This is fascinating," she muttered, her fingers dancing across holographic displays. The sensor data defied every known physical law. The quantum disruptor hadn't just failed. It had been actively countered by some form of quantum interference that seemed to originate from Jack Harper himself. Biological quantum coherence wasn't supposed to be possible, at least not according to every scientific model in the known galaxy. Back on the assassin's command ship, Kralthar received Vorax's encrypted transmission. The report was a clinical breakdown of absolute failure, filled with technical specifications that read like a mathematical nightmare. Quantum targeting systems, compromised. Molecular disruption field, destabilized. Target, completely unarmed. Impossible, Kralthar whispered, his exoskeleton vibrating with a mixture of professional frustration and growing curiosity. The Zernak Guild's initial research suggested humans were a relatively primitive species, technologically nascent, biologically unremarkable. Yet this encounter suggested something entirely different. Dr. Weber's preliminary analysis revealed something extraordinary. The quantum interference didn't appear to be technological. It seemed to be a natural byproduct of human biological systems, as if human cellular structures possessed an inherent ability to generate quantum-level protective fields. Jack Harper returned to his quarters, completely unaware of how close he had come to total molecular dissolution. He made a standard report, grabbed a cup of synthetic coffee, and began reviewing diplomatic communications. Completely normal, completely human. Except nothing about this encounter was normal. In the vast research facilities of the Galactic Confederation, xenobiologists would spend decades trying to understand what had happened on Ganymede Station. How could a species generate quantum-level protective fields as a natural biological function? The first assassination attempt had failed. But more importantly, it had revealed something fundamental about humanity that no one had anticipated. Humans were not just survivors. They were something entirely new. The neural toxin was a masterpiece of xenobiological engineering. 17 different species had contributed their most potent biological weapons, synthesized into a single, impossibly lethal compound. It represented the collective killing potential of civilizations that had spent millennia perfecting the art of biological warfare. Nilarak, the Zernak Guild's foremost biological warfare specialist, had spent 3 cycles developing this specific cocktail. Each molecular component was designed to target the most fundamental biological systems: neural pathways, cellular membranes, mitochondrial functions. Nothing would be left untouched. The diplomatic reception at the Helios orbital complex was the perfect target environment. Neutral ground, hundreds of species present, sophisticated environmental systems that could disperse the toxin with microscopic precision. Ambassador Emily Rodriguez adjusted her earring, a seemingly casual gesture that belied years of diplomatic training. She moved through the crowded reception hall, a master of interspecies communication. Representatives from dozens of civilizations watched her, some with diplomatic curiosity, others with carefully concealed hostility. Nilarak was already in position. The toxin dispersal system was so advanced that no conventional detector would have noticed its activation. A fine mist, completely invisible, began to spread through the reception hall's atmospheric systems. 17 species' most potent neurotoxins drifted toward Emily. She sneezed. The toxin disintegrated. Later medical scans would reveal something that would challenge everything known about biological defense mechanisms. Emily's immune system hadn't just resisted the toxin. It had done something far more extraordinary. The compound was systematically broken down. Molecular markers were cataloged. Antibodies were generated in real time, creating a defensive template that could potentially protect against similar compounds for generations. In the Zernak Guild's research facility, Nilarak stared in absolute disbelief at the incoming transmission. The toxin, a weapon that had a 100% fatality rate across more than 2,500 known sentient species, had been completely neutralized. Not just neutralized. Studied. Understood. Dr. Marcus Reynolds, the lead xenobiological researcher assigned to investigate the incident, could barely contain his excitement. The initial medical scans were unlike anything he had ever seen. Emily Rodriguez's immune response wasn't just a defensive mechanism. It was a living, learning system that processed biological threats like a sophisticated computational network. "This is impossible," he muttered, zooming into the cellular-level imaging. The toxin's molecular structure had been completely mapped, each component analyzed, understood, and then systematically dismantled. But more than that, Emily's immune system was already developing countermeasures that could potentially protect against similar compounds. It was as if her body viewed the toxin not as a threat, but as a problem to be solved. Back at the Helios orbital complex, Emily continued her diplomatic interactions, completely unaware of how close she had come to total biological collapse. She discussed trade agreements, cultural exchange programs, and scientific collaborations with representatives from species that had just attempted to end her life. The Galactic Confederation's xenobiological research teams would spend decades trying to understand what had happened. How could a single human generate such a comprehensive biological defense? Neil Reck's report to Kralthar was a clinical breakdown of absolute failure. Technical specifications that read like a mathematical impossibility. Toxin dispersal. Complete. Target exposure. Confirmed. Biological neutralization. 100%. Threat. Eliminated. Eliminated, but not in the way they had planned. The Zernak Guild's initial research had suggested humans were a relatively primitive species, technologically nascent, biologically unremarkable. Yet this encounter suggested something entirely different. Emily Rodriguez represented something more than just a diplomatic representative. She was a living example of a biological system that didn't just defend itself. It learned, adapted, and grew from potential threats. The second assassination attempt had failed. But more importantly, it had revealed something fundamental about humanity that no one had anticipated. Humans were not just survivors. They were evolutionary pioneers. The research facility orbited a neutron star, its massive computational arrays drawing energy directly from the stellar radiation. Inside, the Galactic Confederation's most brilliant xenobiological and quantum researchers worked frantically to understand the impossible. Dr. Helena Nakamura stood before a holographic display, her fingers tracing complex molecular diagrams that defied conventional scientific understanding. Beside her, Dr. Marcus Reynolds and Dr. Akira Chen compared notes, their expressions a mixture of scientific excitement and growing bewilderment. "This doesn't make sense," Helena muttered, zooming into a microscopic representation of human cellular structures. What they were seeing challenged every established model of biological adaptation. The human subjects, Jack Harper, Emily Rodriguez, and others who had encountered assassination attempts, demonstrated a level of adaptive capacity that seemed to rewrite the fundamental rules of biological evolution. The quantum resilience they had observed wasn't technological. It wasn't an external defense mechanism. It was an intrinsic property of human biology itself. Preliminary data suggested that human cells possessed a form of quantum coherence that allowed them to process environmental threats as complex computational problems. Where other species would produce antibodies or generate defensive responses, humans seemed to create entire new biological algorithms in real time. Dr. Chen pulled up a comparative analysis. 17 different species' defensive biological systems were displayed alongside human cellular responses. The difference was stark and terrifying. Most species had relatively static defensive mechanisms. A threat would trigger a predetermined response. Antibodies would be generated. Cellular repair would initiate. The process was linear, predictable. Humans were different. Their cellular systems appeared to learn, to adapt, to transform. A neural toxin wasn't just neutralized. It was studied, understood, and integrated into a more comprehensive biological defense network. A molecular disruption weapon didn't just fail. It generated a quantum interference pattern that seemed to originate from the human body itself. It's like their entire biological system is a living, adaptive computational network, Akira murmured, adjusting the holographic display. The research team had begun to develop a term for this phenomenon, adaptive quantum biological response, but the term felt inadequate. It was like trying to describe an ocean with a single drop of water. Marcus Reynolds pulled up historical data about human technological development. The parallels were impossible to ignore. Humans approached biological threats the same way they approached technological challenges, not as insurmountable obstacles, but as problems to be solved. Their technological progression had been equally unprecedented. In less than 3 decades, humans had developed communication technologies that bridged impossible distances. They had created quantum computing systems that solved problems other species had worked on for centuries. Their approach to technological innovation mirrored their biological adaptability. Problem-solving wasn't just a skill for humans. It was a fundamental characteristic of their existence. The Zernak Guild's research team had been monitoring these developments. Each failed assassination attempt provided more data, more insight into this impossible species. Kralthar reviewed the latest reports, his exoskeleton vibrating with a mixture of professional frustration and growing respect. The humans weren't just surviving. They were transforming every attempt to destroy them into an opportunity for growth. Back in the research facility, Helena Nakamura made a breakthrough discovery. Human DNA wasn't just a genetic code. It was a complex, adaptive algorithm that could rewrite itself in response to environmental challenges. Each threat didn't just trigger a defensive response. It became part of the human biological database. "We're looking at something entirely new," she said, her voice barely a whisper. The implications were staggering. If humans could adapt this quickly at a biological level, what did that mean for their potential evolution? What technological or biological challenges could they not ultimately overcome? The fourth assassination attempt hadn't just failed. It had revealed a fundamental truth about humanity that would reshape galactic understanding forever. Humans were not just a species. They were a living, adaptive phenomenon. Zera Kun was the most feared psychological warfare specialist in the Galactic Confederation. For centuries, their ability to break the mental resilience of entire civilizations had been legendary. Entire species had collapsed under carefully constructed psychological attacks that targeted the most fundamental emotional vulnerabilities. Humans would be different. Michael Thompson sat in his office at the Interstellar Diplomatic Court, reviewing a series of complex negotiation reports. He had no idea that the most sophisticated psychological warfare weapon in galactic history was about to be deployed against him. The attack was multifaceted, a carefully constructed assault designed to exploit every known psychological weakness. It began subtly. Communication intercepts, strategically leaked information, carefully constructed narratives that would have shattered the resolve of any other known species. First came the professional undermining. Classified documents suggested that Michael's most significant diplomatic achievements were actually the result of manipulation by other species. His negotiation records were recontextualized to appear as a series of strategic failures rather than groundbreaking diplomatic successes. Most species would have been devastated. Careers would crumble. Psychological integrity would collapse. Michael reviewed the documents. He called a meeting. Zera Kun watched in growing disbelief. Instead of being destroyed, Michael transformed the potential psychological devastation into a strategic planning session. He gathered his team, analyzed the leaked information, and used it as an opportunity for deeper institutional review. The psychological weapon was supposed to create isolation. Humans valued social connection above individual achievement. By undermining Michael's professional reputation, the attack should have severed his social support networks. But humans didn't work that way. His colleagues rallied around him. The leaked documents became a collaborative investigation. Where other species would have seen vulnerability, humans saw an opportunity for collective growth. Zera Kun's neural interface flooded with impossible data. The psychological attack wasn't just failing. It was being systematically dismantled and transformed into a source of organizational strength. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the lead xenopsychological researcher, would later describe this phenomenon as collective resilience. Human emotional systems didn't just defend against psychological attacks. They transformed them. The research was fascinating. Where most species had clearly defined emotional boundaries, humans seemed to have a fluid, adaptive emotional intelligence. An attack designed to create fractures instead created stronger connections. Michael's response was quintessentially human. He didn't just defend against the psychological warfare. He used it as an opportunity to improve institutional processes, strengthen team cohesion, and develop new diplomatic strategies. Zera Kun's report to the Zernak Guild was a clinical breakdown of absolute failure. Psychological warfare techniques that had ended civilizations had been completely neutralized by something far more complex than traditional defensive mechanisms. Back in the research facility, Elena Rodriguez analyzed the psychological data. The human response wasn't just a defensive mechanism. It was a form of collective problem-solving that transformed potential threats into opportunities for growth. They don't just survive psychological attacks, she told her research team. They learn from them. The psychological warfare attempt revealed something fundamental about human social structures. Where other species saw conflict as a zero-sum game, humans saw it as a collaborative problem-solving exercise. Kralthar reviewed the reports with growing frustration and reluctant respect. The humans weren't just resisting psychological warfare. They were rewriting the fundamental rules of psychological engagement. Each assassination attempt had revealed another layer of human complexity. Their biological systems learned. Their technological approaches transformed challenges. And now, their psychological mechanisms demonstrated an unprecedented level of adaptive intelligence. The fifth assassination attempt had failed. But more importantly, it had exposed a truth about humanity that would reshape galactic understanding forever. Humans were not just a resilient species. They were a living, adaptive social phenomenon that transformed challenges into opportunities for collective growth. The Central Confederation Hall stretched like a crystalline cathedral, its massive dome capturing starlight from a dozen nearby systems. Representatives from 2,347 distinct civilizations sat in carefully arranged diplomatic tiers, their collective tension palpable. News of the failed assassination attempts had spread faster than quantum communication networks could track. What had begun as a cover contract against a seemingly insignificant species was now the most discussed topic in galactic diplomatic circles. Ambassador Elena Rodriguez stood at the central podium, her presence commanding attention despite the hall being filled with species millennia older than human civilization. Behind her, holographic displays showed detailed accounts of the assassination attempts, molecular disruption, biological warfare, psychological manipulation, all systematically neutralized by humanity. "We do not seek conflict," Elena said, her voice calm and measured. "But we will not be intimidated." The hall fell silent. Representatives from the Syndicate Worlds, the collective that had originally funded the assassination contract, shifted uncomfortably. Their carefully constructed narrative was unraveling. Humans were supposed to be a young, naive species, easy targets, potential colonial subjects. Instead, they had demonstrated capabilities that defied every established galactic understanding of biological, technological, and social evolution. Dr. Marcus Chen, the lead xenobiological researcher, presented the scientific findings. His presentation was a masterpiece of clinical detail and profound revelation. Each slide revealed another layer of human adaptive complexity. Biological systems that learned like living computational networks. Psychological structures that transformed attacks into opportunities for collective growth. Technological development that seemed to accelerate exponentially when faced with external challenges. The Zernak Assassins Guild, once feared across multiple galactic sectors, was now under formal investigation. Their contract was being dissected, their methods scrutinized. What had seemed like a routine elimination mission had exposed fundamental flaws in established galactic power structures. Kralthar watched the proceedings from a secure observation point. The Guild's reputation was in ruins. More importantly, they had inadvertently revealed something profound about humanity. Species that had spent millennia maintaining carefully constructed hierarchies were forced to reconsider their understanding of evolutionary potential. Humans weren't just surviving. They were rewriting the fundamental rules of galactic engagement. The diplomatic implications were staggering. Species that had previously viewed humans as potential subjects or minor players now saw them as something entirely different. A civilization that didn't just adapt but transformed every challenge into an opportunity for collective advancement. Trade negotiations that had been stalled for centuries suddenly found new momentum. Human diplomatic teams approached complex interstellar conflicts with a problem-solving approach that was simultaneously pragmatic and revolutionary. "They don't see boundaries," one senior Confederation diplomat whispered to another. "They see opportunities for collaborative solutions." The research data was compelling. Where most species had rigid biological, technological, and social systems, humans demonstrated a fluidity that was both terrifying and fascinating. Their cellular structures learned. Their social networks transformed. Their technological development seemed to follow no conventional pattern. Ambassador Rodriguez's presentation concluded with a simple statement that would be quoted across thousands of worlds. Humanity does not seek to conquer. We seek to understand. And in understanding, we grow. The Confederation Hall erupted into a complex symphony of translation devices and emotional resonance fields. Species communicated using methods that ranged from biochemical exchanges to quantum telepathy. Yet the message was universal. Humans were not what anyone had expected. The Syndicate World's representatives found themselves increasingly isolated. Their attempt to eliminate humanity had backfired spectacularly. Instead of removing a potential threat, they had introduced the galaxy to a species that challenged every existing model of civilization. Dr. Helena Nakamura, watching from the research facility, understood the deeper implications. This wasn't just about one failed assassination attempt. This was a fundamental shift in galactic understanding of evolutionary potential. Humans represented something new. The living, adaptive phenomenon that didn't just respond to challenges but transformed them. The sixth attempt to understand humanity had revealed a truth more profound than any assassination contract could have anticipated. Humans were not just a species. They were a living, evolving concept of potential itself. The interdimensional holding facility orbited a quantum-stabilized neutron star, its molecular structure shifting between multiple dimensional planes to ensure absolute security. Kralthar sat in a containment chamber that defied every known principle of physical restraint. His capture had been anything but conventional. What began as a final, desperate attempt to understand humanity had transformed into the most significant intelligence-gathering opportunity in galactic history. Kralthar had made a fatal error. He had personally attempted to eliminate a human researcher, believing his centuries of assassination experience would overcome the seemingly impossible human adaptability. Dr. Sarah Leonardi was no ordinary researcher. Her work in quantum xenobiology had already challenged multiple established scientific paradigms. When Kralthar's assassination attempt began, she didn't just defend herself. She turned the attack into an opportunity for unprecedented scientific investigation. The interrogation team was a carefully constructed group. Michael Thompson led the diplomatic approach. Dr. Helena Nakamura managed the scientific investigation. Jack Harper oversaw security protocols. Emily Rodriguez coordinated the interspecies communication strategies. Humans didn't view Kralthar as a mere prisoner. They saw him as a complex problem to be understood. "We're not interested in punishment," Michael Thompson began, his voice calm and analytical. "We want to understand." The translation systems worked overtime, capturing not just linguistic nuances, but subtle biochemical communication markers. Where most species would approach interrogation with aggression or fear, humans approached it with a combination of scientific curiosity and collaborative problem-solving. Kralthar's neural implants were carefully studied, not to be disabled, but to be understood. The Zernak Assassins Guild's most advanced technological systems became a source of collaborative research. Humans didn't seek to destroy advanced technology. They sought to learn from it. Dr. Nakamura's initial analysis was fascinating. The neural implants revealed complex communication networks that spanned multiple galactic sectors. The assassination attempts against humans were just the tip of a much larger systemic issue. The Syndicate Worlds had been manipulating interstellar conflicts for centuries. The contract against humanity was part of a broader strategy to maintain existing power structures. Humans represented something terrifying to these established civilizations, a species that didn't just challenge the status quo, but fundamentally reimagined it. Kralthar realized something profound during the interrogation. Humans weren't just defending themselves. They were creating an entirely new model of interspecies engagement. Every piece of information he revealed was carefully analyzed, not as a weapon, but as an opportunity for understanding. The humans reconstructed the Zernak Guild's operational structure, not to destroy it, but to understand the complex socio-political systems that had created such an organization. Why humans? Helena Nakamura asked during one of the extended interrogation sessions. Why target our diplomatic representatives? The answer revealed a deeper galactic tension. Humans had been disrupting established power structures simply by existing. Their approach to diplomacy, technology, and social organization challenged everything other species considered fundamental. Emily Rodriguez led a team that began developing communication protocols with the Zernak civilization. Where most species would seek retribution, humans taught understanding. The assassination attempts became an opportunity for unprecedented interspecies dialogue. Jack Harper's security analysis revealed something even more significant. The assassination attempts were part of a broader pattern of systemic conflict management that had existed for millennia. Humans were introducing a completely new paradigm, one of collaborative problem-solving and mutual growth. The research teams worked around the clock. Kralthar's neural implants, communication logs, and personal history became a comprehensive case study in galactic conflict dynamics. Each piece of information was treated with scientific rigor and diplomatic sensitivity. As the interrogation progressed, something unexpected happened. Kralthar began to understand humanity in a way no one in the Zernak Guild had anticipated. They weren't a threat to be eliminated. They were a complex, adaptive phenomenon that challenged fundamental assumptions about civilization itself. The Galactic Confederation watched with growing fascination. What had begun as an assassination attempt had transformed into the most significant interspecies research opportunity in recorded history. Humans didn't just survive the attack. They turned it into a moment of collective understanding. The seventh attempt to eliminate humanity had failed spectacularly. But more importantly, it had revealed a truth more profound than any assassination contract could have anticipated. Humans were not just a species to be studied. They were a living, evolving concept of collaborative potential. The Galactic Confederation's emergency session would be remembered as a turning point in interstellar history. Delegates from 2,847 different civilizations gathered in a massive holographic conference that spanned multiple dimensional frequencies. Jack Harper, Emily Rodriguez, and Michael Thompson stood at the center of the proceedings. They weren't conquerors. They weren't victims. They were something entirely new. The comprehensive report detailing the assassination attempts was more than just a security briefing. It was a fundamental reimagining of what intelligent life could be. Dr. Helena Nakamura presented the scientific findings. Her presentation was a masterpiece of clinical detail and profound revelation. The humans had not just survived multiple assassination attempts. They had transformed each attempt into an opportunity for collective growth and understanding. Biological systems that learned like living computational networks. Psychological structures that turned attacks into collaborative problem-solving. Technological development that accelerated exponentially when faced with external challenges. The syndicate worlds found themselves increasingly isolated. Their attempt to eliminate humanity had backfired spectacularly. Instead of removing a potential threat, they had introduced the galaxy to a species that challenged every existing model of civilization. We do not seek to replace existing systems, Emily Rodriguez stated, her voice carrying across multiple translation matrices. We seek to evolve them. The diplomatic implications were staggering. Species that had maintained rigid power structures for millennia were forced to reconsider their understanding of evolutionary potential. Humans demonstrated a fluidity that was both terrifying and fascinating. Their cellular structures learned. Their social networks transformed. Their technological development followed no conventional pattern. Michael Thompson outlined a new framework for interstellar cooperation. It wasn't about domination or competition. It was about collaborative problem-solving. Where previous diplomatic models relied on complex negotiation and power balancing, humans introduced a radical concept of mutual growth. Jack Harper's security analysis revealed the deeper systemic issues that had led to the assassination attempts. The data showed a galaxy trapped in outdated conflict management strategies. Humans were introducing a completely new paradigm of interspecies engagement. The research data was compelling. Most species had rigid biological, technological, and social systems. Humans demonstrated an adaptive capacity that defied conventional understanding. Their approach to challenges was fundamentally different. They didn't just respond, they transformed. Dr. Nakamura's final presentation slide contained a simple statement that would be quoted across thousands of worlds. Adaptation is not just survival. It is an ongoing process of collective reimagining. The Zernak Assassins Guild was formally disbanded, but this was more than a punitive action. It was an invitation to reimagine conflict resolution. The Guild's extensive databases became a collaborative research project, with representatives from multiple species working together to understand the underlying systemic issues. Kralfar, once the most feared assassin in the galaxy, became a key source of information. His neural implants and historical records provided unprecedented insights into long-standing interstellar conflicts. The humans didn't seek revenge. They sought understanding. The diplomatic breakthrough went beyond traditional peace negotiations. It was a fundamental restructuring of how different species could interact. Trade agreements that had been stalled for centuries suddenly found new momentum. Complex interstellar conflicts were approached with a problem-solving methodology that was simultaneously pragmatic and revolutionary. Elena Rodriguez, leading the new Interstellar Collaborative Research Initiative, explained the human approach. We don't see boundaries. We see opportunities for collective growth. The galactic understanding of humanity transformed completely. They were no longer viewed as a young, naive species. They were recognized as evolutionary pioneers, a living demonstration of adaptive potential. The technological implications were equally profound. Human research teams began collaborating with species that had previously been considered irreconcilable. Quantum communication technologies evolved. Biological understanding expanded. Diplomatic frameworks were reimagined. As the Confederation session concluded, something unprecedented happened. Species that had been in conflict for millennia began preliminary dialogue. The humans had demonstrated that conflict was not an inevitability, but a problem to be solved collaboratively. The eighth and final attempt to understand humanity had revealed a truth more profound than any assassination contract could have anticipated. Humans were not just a species. They were a living, evolving concept of collaborative potential, a beacon of hope in a galaxy long divided by conflict. Some species evolve. Humans rewrite the very rules of evolution.